everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us on Zoom and on WOVA. A very warm welcome to Green Hope Foundation's side event at the 2022 ECOSOC Partnership Forum. Today, we are going to be talking about a very important topic, which is how we can rebuild better in vulnerable communities through the circular economy model. My name is Gehekasha. I am the founder president of Green Hope Foundation, and I am delighted to be your moderator for this webinar. We are almost at the halfway mark in terms of the elapsed time on the road to Agenda 2030 to achieving the SDGs, but really in terms of deliverables, on many accounts, we've regressed beyond the starting line even. And the easiest thing to do would be to blame it all on the pandemic. And that is what the majority of our leaders, for people, are doing. But the question is, where's the foresight? Why couldn't we have anticipated our frailty when the signs of endemic failures in our systems were so blatantly visible? And through our propensity to ignore the obvious, we're allowing another demonic phenomena, one that has the power to cause devastation and suffering on a scale several times over that of the pandemic, and in all possibility, wipe out life as we know it on the planet. And that's the existential threat of climate change combined with social injustice and nuclear weapons. And that continues to manifest itself in more ominous ways with each passing day, just exacerbating inequalities as it has so immensely during the pandemic. And every moment of procrastination is making the road to recovery even more tenuous. But the solutions are all there. In the Sustainable Development Goals, we have the framework available that, if implemented, can lead us out of this morass that we're currently in. And we at Green Hope Foundation can speak on this with conviction because we are working on the ground every day to address these massive inequalities, not only by localizing the SDGs, but also ensuring that they're implemented in their full capacity on the ground. So why can't we adopt this pathway and move away from the linear mechanism of production and consumption that is at the root of inequality and environmental degradation? What must we do to raise awareness, to gather consensus, to motivate and accelerate this change so that we can truly rebuild better? To answer these and address these questions from all facets, we have with us today an absolutely stellar panel, a global viewpoint that is interdisciplinary as well as intergenerational. So with that, I would like to invite our first speaker, Ms. Maria Fernandez Espinoza, former president of the United Nations General Assembly and currently senior fellow at the Robert Bosch Academy. Ms. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much, Kekashan. As always, it is such a privilege to be with you. Thank you for bringing us together to discuss an issue of critical importance for the future of sustainability, but also for what you very wisely said, to speed up the implementation and delivery of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. And today I would like to use my time to reflect about urban sustainability in the circular economy. And we know, you already mentioned that, but we know that cities are responsible for 75% of global CO2 emissions. And every year we waste 1.3 gigatons of edible food, and this releases 3.3 gigatons of CO2. These numbers are astronomical, and cities account for less than 2% of the Earth's surface. So this is a major dysfunction and inequality, and this means that any solution to environmental sustainability, to the climate crisis, to the inequalities crisis, has to come from sustainable urban environments. Cities also generate 1.3 billion tons of solid waste every year. Almost 57% of the global population today lives in cities. In my region, in Latin America and the Caribbean, for example, 81.2% of the population lives in urban areas. And this explains why the role of cities, of local and regional governments are absolutely critical, as you said, to localize SDGs and to experiment new forms of economy and new forms of production and consumption that are not linear but circular. And here, allow me to basically address three major challenges, but also opportunities for the circular economy. First is how to scale up circular economy experiences and transform them into the norm in urban planning. We have very good examples from the private sector in packaging, for example, or single-use plastics, etc. And we have good examples from cities such as the city of Oakland, of Berlin, where I currently live, Toronto, cities in China and India and Colombia. But we need circular economy to be scalable and comprehensive, which means that it requires a set of tools, technologies, capacities that should be shared and developed. And here the role, as mentioned, of local and regional governments is critical. Circular cities require circular infrastructure, circular manufacturing. It is not as easy as it sounds. The challenge and the opportunity number two is how to deal with the tension between poverty and circular economy. The challenge to ensure the reuse, recycle, low carbon urban footprint has to consider the uneven distribution of space, of services, of power in an urban setting. And let's only remember that 689 million people live in extreme poverty, and 2/3 of the urban population is poor, and 1.9 billion people. These are big numbers as well. So circular economy requires a minimum threshold of human dignity. And that's, I think, critical when we apply a circular economy strategies and planning and policies. And this means that there is a need to use circular economy as a part of a broader approach of integral sustainability that includes decent jobs, closing the gender inequality gap, strengthening social security nets, redesigning the care economy, only just to cite a few examples. And all of these issues are central for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Third and last, because the time is short today, circular economy should be connected with rethinking wealth creation through the use of nature and services to a more avant-garde concept of reducing consumption and putting a value in ecosystem services, and to traditional knowledge conservation of species, and to go beyond measuring the economy using the GDP as the sole indicator. So basically, there are many fascinating examples and proposals on the table and on how to go beyond GDP, including, for example, the happiness index in Bhutan and other countries that are starting to do that. In my own country, we had a very interesting experience on the well-being index. All this should be part and parcel when we think about circular economies. And just to close in short, I think that the idea of a circular economy of the subsidiarity principle to look at localities, I think it provides us with a great opportunity for rethinking and redesigning our production and consumption patterns, as you mentioned. And it can provide, of course, new avenues to reconcile the economy with human well-being and with nature. But we should also acknowledge that it cannot be seen as an unquestionable panacea. It requires a very strong people rights, nature justice, and equality approach. So there is no easy fix. We are lagging behind, almost in every single SDG, and it's time to be bold, creative, and to exercise our leadership wherever we are as citizens, as members of the private sector, as government leaders, but especially and very important as women. So thank you, and back to you, Kekashin.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maria, for highlighting the importance of urban sustainability and how urban sustainability is absolutely crucial in moving towards circular economy. And it's like this interconnected process, and we often forget about the importance of cities when we talk about sustainable development. So thank you for sharing that perspective. On that note, I would like to invite our next panelist, Honorable Douglas Roche, former Canadian Senator and author of Hope Not Fear, Building Peace in a Fractured World. Senator Roche, the floor is yours. Senator Roche, you're on mute.
Thank you, Kekashin, and it's a pleasure to join my fellow panelists and pick up on the theme mentioned a moment ago by Maria Espinoza, that we're lagging behind in the SDGs. And I want to refer also to your opening comment, Kekashin, that we cannot blame just the pandemic for this sad state of affairs, because the situation of the SDGs transcended the unfortunate fallout from the pandemic. It is a deeper problem. The pandemic is part of it, but the problem is deeper. And undoubtedly, we should have stronger financial mechanisms to help the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. But in my view, what is needed most of all is a stronger moral approach to the development of all humanity. And I think we have to keep ourselves focused on the large motivation that is needed to bring economic and social development to the world's most vulnerable people. And in this respect, I think it is wrong to spend $2 trillion a year on armaments at the expense of properly funding health and education systems for the world's most vulnerable people. And the blame for the excess of militarism lies squarely with the military-industrial complex, which drives the high spending, particularly in the most advanced countries. This dichotomy is an anachronism. It is an outrageous abuse of the power and strength of the world, that it is turned to continued development of armaments every year at the expense of the human essential components of the security agenda. So we have to just keep stating clearly that it is wrong for the arms merchants of the world to be stealing money from the poorest people. So now the pandemic gives us the opportunity to reflect more deeply on the inequities in the world. I mean, it brings it in, perhaps into a more dramatic focus. And we ought to use this time to to reconstitute our basic thinking of why we have the SDGs in the first place. And I believe that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Guterres, has certainly stood up for a social contract that should be implemented between the rich and the poor countries, so that there would be a more equitable distribution of the resources and the wealth and the capacities of the world that could be provide food and health care and water and sanitation and education and decent work and social security that the Sustainable Development Goals represent. These are basic human rights that we're speaking about here. And we ought not to lose sight of the need to build a peaceful world that will have as a huge dividend, not just the development of people, which is important for its own sake, but will bring a common security to us all. And at this time, when there's so much unrest in the world and the political divisions are so sharply pointed up by the situation of the Ukraine today and the possibility of war, we need to regroup our thinking to have a better understanding that it is not arms and militarism that is going to bring us security. It is rather the development of all peoples. So for this reason, a group of Nobel Peace Laureates recently said that let us, recognizing that military expenditures increase 2% every year, let us use that 2% increase, redirect that 2% to economic and social development via the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is a very achievable route to take and would reflect a moral compass, a recognition that we have to direct the world political and economic structures to the building of a safe and secure humanity. This has been. These are not new thoughts as such. The relationship between disarmament and development has long been examined and studied at the United Nations and illustrated the point that the security for all is increased to the extent that there is disarmament and development, and the transfer of the excessive amounts of money going to militarism to economic and social development would be a signal. It would be a new strength for the world that we care more about the development of human beings than we do about the old outmoded ideas that we could have security through arms. So I'm calling for a rededication of all our systems to a better exposition of a deep moral commitment to humanity, and the Sustainable Development Goals at this time of the pandemic give us a renewed opportunity to make that contribution to our fellow human beings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Roche. Absolutely. We do need a stronger moral approach. And at the end of the day, what we need are just to address these basic human rights. It's not something, special or like something extra we need to do. It's just the basic human rights. And of course, as we should know as human beings, fighting and like the military and arms, you're not going to bring us security. But if we have social justice, if we have human development and environmental protection, all of these things, we will be able to have true security. And the pandemic is not just one example of how arms have not been able to help us achieve security. And of course, we see other instances all around the world with inequalities and much more, and how they even exacerbate those. So yes, we need to redefine what we see as security and just address these basic human rights. Thank you once again. I would now like to invite our next panelist, Audrey Kitagawa, President and founder of the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation. Madam Kitagawa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kikashan and the Green Hope Foundation for this invitation to be with all of you today. I really appreciate the focus of this webinar on local circular economies because it is looking at alternative economic models of systems designs that can address human needs and fairly distribute resources without undermining the functioning of the biosphere or crossing planetary boundaries. And the beauty of the circular model is that it can be localized, whether in urban settings or in rural settings, because you cannot exclude taking into consideration the context of the environment and the society in which it is going to be designed. I would argue that in the past 70 years or so, the linear materials production and output model that we have utilized has itself spawned the global problems which the 17 Sustainable Development Goals have identified and are seeking solutions for. So the environmental degradation has been a major result of this activity. And Kate Raworth, in her book, Donut Economics, argues that 20th century economic thinking is not equipped to deal with the 21st century reality of a planet teetering on the edge of climate breakdown. Instead of equating a growing GDP with a successful society, our goal should be to fit all of human life into what Raworth calls the sweet spot between the social foundation, where everyone has what they need to live a good life, and the environmental ceiling. By and large, people in rich countries are living above the environmental ceiling, and those in poorer countries often fall below the social foundation. A Time magazine article writing about her described how, while studying economics at Oxford University, she was learning about ideas from decades and sometimes centuries ago: supply and demand, efficiency, rationality, and economic growth as the ultimate goal. Raworth says this: the concepts of the 20th century emerged from an era in which humanity saw itself as separated from the web of life. In this worldview, environmental issues are relegated to what economists call externalities. And it's just an ultimate absurdity, she said, that in the 21st century, when we know we are witnessing the death of the living world, unless we utterly transform the way we live, that death of the living world is called an environmental externality. So several organizations, individuals, and states are looking at alternative models, and the circular economy is one of them. As such, there are many various presentations of this model, but the main point for me is that we have now begun the dilation of our thinking to look for alternatives rather than adhering to a linear economic model that is causing the existential threat to our environment and to us. And the major flaw with a linear model is the assumption that we have unlimited resources. And it has become obvious that our natural resources are limited and being depleted at unsustainable rates. The linear model also fails to consider the impact on the environment, which we can clearly see that this model has caused the environmental degradation and its failure to take into consideration the well-being of the people and the planet and all of the sentient beings which inhabit it. So climate change, population growth, unsustainable lifestyles, surmounting global challenges like these require embracing a circular economy as a potential guiding light. So produce, consume, dispose, it often works like a one-way street. But this linear economy of take, make, waste production, and consumption isn't compatible with the challenges facing the world today. To take on climate change and to preserve our planet, we have to move away from a single-use mindset. Our society must find new ways of putting our world's limited resources to good use and reuse. That means making products that last for as long as possible, avoiding waste, and viewing used products as a resource, recovering everything we can from them to recycle along the value chain. It also means exploring alternative sources of sustainable raw materials, such as biomass and even CO2 itself. On top of it all, there's renewable energy, which is needed to power a truly resource-efficient economy. The pandemic has shown us that we want an economic model that is not reactive, but rather proactive in mitigating future crises. In our current linear model, we collect raw materials, make products out of them, and eventually throw them away. A circular economy stops waste from being produced in the first place, and raw materials and products lose value as little as possible. And according to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, a circular economy is based on 3 principles. 1, eliminate waste and pollution. 2, circulate products and materials. 3, regenerate nature. Another way to say it, the 3R approach: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And to help create circular economies, we need a transformation of conditioned mindsets and examine alternatives to our linear material systems economic model that are clearly unsustainable. And that is exactly what this webinar is trying to do. So thank you again, Kekashan, for providing this platform for this discussion to create the dilation of our calcified thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Kiragawa. Absolutely. Once again, thank you for highlighting how important our circular economy model is, and that really helps to eliminate, as you said, our take, make, waste model. And really, if we want to solve our world's problems, we cannot continue in that single-use mindset anymore. We need to adopt this model of circularity. So yes, absolutely, we can't wait anymore. We have to act on it now. So thank you once again for sharing your views with us today. I'd now invite our next panelist, Dr. Hofstede Abiola, who is the Executive President of the Women in Africa Initiative. Hofstede, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kekashan. I just want to, before I offer my thoughts on this question, just say that, I don't know how old you are now, Kekashan, but when I first met you, you were all of 15. I remember you flew with your dad to the conference that we were doing in Germany, and it has been such a pleasure to watch how you've grown, the way you've continued to be active and engaged in global issues, and you keep expanding your impact. I have this theory that if you really want to go very far, you should start early. Actually, my uncle, the Nobel laureate for literature, Wole Soyinka, wrote a book that said, you must set off at dawn. And when I think of your life story, Kekashan, I think you set off at dawn, and it's going to be such a pleasure to see where you get to at nightfall. Just continue going. You're really an inspiration to all of us. This issue of a circular economy is critical, and even just the general issue of saving our planet. I'm from Nigeria in Africa, and Africa has maybe the smallest carbon footprint of all the continents in the world, but it hasn't protected us from having the impacts of climate change. And in fact, we're already experiencing that in many African countries. There's even just in the gateway into the continent of Africa, Senegal, it's a tiny country with giant people. And in that country, one of the big things that they eat is called chebujien, which is made with rice, and it is incredibly delicious. Actually, all the data, all the studies are showing that they will not be able to produce enough rice to continue to eat that. Their production, because of climate change, production is going to go down by as much as 60%. and they're going to have to look for new forms of nutrition. The crisis on the continent is real. And when I speak about this space, if you would allow me to just focus my thoughts on this, our space, the continent of Africa, this is a continent that has 1.3 billion people, of which 60% of them are under 30, and of which there are economies that have 25% unemployment and 25% underemployment. Underemployment is that they have jobs, but they don't earn enough to live. So you're looking at, the other day I was in France in the month of October at a conference, and I asked them, so what is unemployment and underemployment in France? Because, you always see the gilets jaunes on the street, like, we have had enough, we've had enough. So what is what are the indicators that are pushing the people to the very edge and making them, radicalizing them and prompting them towards populism? The unemployment rate in France was not even 8%, maybe 7%. So I'm saying that most of the African countries, sorry, Khalil, Bella, can you please bring me the charger for my computer and help me charge it? Sorry, it's as much as like 50%. So, Kirkushan, when you are reading the news about West Africa, which is where Nigeria is located, and you read that Guinea-Bissau was falling to a coup d'etat, so it's now under military regime, that Mali has fallen to a coup d'etat, that Burkina Faso, just a few weeks ago, fell to a coup d'etat. It is because we have democracies, the democracies are not able to solve the economic challenge. And the economic challenge is really pressing on people. And yet this is a continent that is part of a global economic system. We supply petroleum, we supply gas, we supply coltan, without which you cannot have a cell phone. We supply diamonds, we supply copper, we supply so much of strategic and critical resources to the world system that allows the world to run. The uranium that we supply to France powers 30% of French energy needs in France. It comes from one country, Niger, just north of Nigeria, our neighbor to the north. Niger doesn't even have 10% of its energy needs for its population met, not even 10%. Now, without energy, you can do nothing. I'm from a continent where you find around 600 million people without access to energy. 600 million, Kirkushan. 600 million people without access to energy. So when we talk about this circular economy, I think about, I love the word circular economy. It's a beautiful word, isn't it? It's a nice phrase. It looks at circularity and it seems so natural, like that's how the world is. And it is how the world is. We are going almost in a circular orbit around the sun that powers us and the moon that moves the tides, so it all makes sense. But I think, my sister, that it cannot make sense unless it's also guided by a secular understanding of humanity and of life, by which I mean that it's not just for the Western world to send us their used clothes. In fact, African clothes are nicer than your clothes, and we don't want them. Sorry, you can keep it. We don't want your ugly clothes. I mean, when I was young, my mom refused to let me wear jeans because she was like, what are you wearing? Have you seen our clothes? The beautiful bright colors, the tie and dye that we make. Our clothes are so beautiful. As many things that we have are so beautiful on the continent. We don't want your used clothes. And even if we want to take your used clothes to help you recycle it, does it make sense that you are over-consuming when we can hardly consume at all? It doesn't make sense. And so I think that undergirding the circular economy concept must be Ubuntu, which is the African concept, that I am because you are, that we're together in a circular world of, in a circular world of common humanity, that, as you will reduce consumption so I can increase, because I am so close to the very edge and you are so far to the extreme. So, I think that this is what I think is critical. And we have the opportunity because with pandemic, we had global disruption of value chains. This is an opportunity for us because, why are all the multinationals producing in Africa, but bringing the resources that they're using for the production from far away and wasting so much fuel in the logistics of moving the goods from thousands of kilometers away to the continent? Consider McDonald's. McDonald's they put out a notice in Kenya apologizing to the people of Kenya that they would not be able to provide chips because the supply from Egypt and South Africa was affected and there was going to be a problem of their supply. But in Kenya, they produce potatoes. In Kenya, they produce potatoes. So why go all the way to Egypt or South Africa, which are our own brothers and sisters to the north and to the south? Yes, but you can also get it locally. And we need to begin to get all these companies to go local. Because when they go local, it's not just that we lower the carbon footprint, which is critical for the earth, but we create work for people around who need the work. And, because charity can only go so far, and there's all the global aid of trillions of dollars, but much of that charity of trillions of dollars always ends up back in the global north anyway. So keep the charity. Let's talk about business and let's locate business on the right foundation that allows the dignity, recognizes the dignity and the contribution of all the different players in the game. Because there's no reason why we have this global system except that we want to concentrate wealth. But if we want if we want the world to work, the wealth cannot be so concentrated. If the wealth is as concentrated as it is, we will have the gilets jaunes, we will have the coup d'etat that will be affecting democracy and setting us back democratically. We will have populism across Europe and across the world. Why do we have all of those things in the world today? Is because the world is shouting. People of the world are screaming for equity, for dignity, for recognition, for voice, for affirmation. And with the world that we're living in so far, it's almost, I recognize Senator Roche, and I can hear from what he said that he's one of our allies in the political centers, but it's as if the political centers have been overtaken by big money. And that's why I want to end with you, Kakashan. From the age of 15, you've been building movements. I think this is the time that we must counter big money with big people. And when I say big people, I just mean big networks of people speaking about change, being about change, fighting for change, sacrificing for change. A new world is not only possible, but it is on its way. And it's people coming together that will call it into being.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hafsa, for sharing that with us. And absolutely, as Green Hope Foundation NGO working on the ground, we see every day how important it is to not resort to charity, instead ensuring that we have not sympathy, but empathy for people so that every single person has a life of dignity. And we really need to stop this whole process of just viewing the global south as victims. Instead, we need to understand that if, as you said, if we have to move to a circular economy model, we need a circular understanding of humanity. And I think that unless we move towards that, have that understanding, we will not be able to achieve a sustainable future. So thank you so much for highlighting that. And now I would like to invite our next panelist, Faraya Osfestrioglu, who is the CEO of the World Humanitarian Forum. Faraya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kekeshan. It is a pleasure to be with you as always and this distinguished panel. And actually, it is hard for me to make any remarks after these, inspirational and exceptional contributions from the panel. So I will try my best really to add a few more things. I agree. COVID just made it worse inequalities, but it has already been there. And it has also put a greater burden on the poor and vulnerable. It is a fact we can't avoid, unfortunately. Much of the development and progress achieved on these SDGs, as again you mentioned, have been pushed back, especially in the areas of education, ending poverty and hunger. And while the pandemic has caused immense distress, we all understood the importance of togetherness, and we have a unique window to be able to build forward better. This has been the phrase I've been using since almost the beginning of the pandemic. Building back better is not enough, because back was not good enough. We have to build forward better with this unique opportunity. Also, we have an opportunity to be able to build on SDG 17 in particular, which is partnerships. And we can implement multi-stakeholder approach in order to unlock the potential and advance SDGs, which are very much interconnected. And even if we will not be able to achieve them all by 2030, we have huge potential to progress on the ones that will unlock the path to the success of the others. And creation of local circular economies, I think, are very much interconnected with SDGs as well, because circular economy replaces the end of cycle concept with restoration. And this is also what the SDGs are for. Circular economy creates sustainability also. And at WHF, from our organization point of view, we have the theme of people, planet, and prosperity for this year. And while considering the planet, we need to make sure not to leave anyone behind. And as I mentioned, circular economy creates opportunities for people. It serves to people, serves to the planet, and definitely will lead to the prosperity. The other fellow panelists mentioned about better commitment to humanity and humanity overall. And again, this is something I would like to share on this panel. WHF as a convener is committed to shape the future for a better tomorrow. And we are initiating this year the fifth revolution concept as a result of 2-year preparation and as a result of the driven conversations and consultations over the 2 years since the beginning of the pandemic. The fifth revolution proposal, which is the current period of rapid, simultaneous, and systematic transformations driven by impact and purpose, is reshaping industries, challenging existing regulatory frameworks, and even redefining what it means to be a human. And we are calling all humans to be humanitarians, because we need to also redefine what humanitarianism means. And we definitely need that transformation, that transition from aid to development, in a way, what Hofstede has mentioned. So I stop here and I call everyone to be a humanitarian and also be a part of the fifth revolution concept and dialogue.
Thank you so much, Farah, for once again highlighting how important it is that we take on that humanitarian approach. And of course, highlighting how important it is that we now work on SDG 17 as well, as it recognizes how interconnected all of the SDGs are and how we need that circular economy model and all circular model really in all aspects of our work on sustainable development to ensure a just and equitable future for all. Thank you once again. And with that, I would like to invite our lead discussant, Anchita Hegde, who's the chapter head of Green Hope Foundation India, to take the floor. Anchita, over to you.
Thank you, Kaksha, and thank you to all the speakers for their valuable inputs. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought unprecedented fallout that have left countries grappling, and with the rise in the new variants, it is predicted to derail the global economic recovery in 2022. All of this proves that our traditional linear approach to economic growth is not only unsustainable, but extremely fragile too. However, it is important to understand that the crisis created by coronavirus pandemic provides us a unique opportunity to embrace a fundamental change in our economic system. It shows us that humanity is capable of change. We need to shift our approach from the take, make, dispose model to a sustainable and just circular economy, one that is based on nature-based solutions and geared towards public well-being. At Greenhow Foundation, we have seen firsthand how pre-existing inequalities have been amplified during the pandemic, where children, especially girls, were forced to drop out of school, where the linear economy model completely collapsed, leaving vulnerable communities without jobs. However, we understand that in order to rebuild better within these communities, we would have to provide them with the tools and skill sets to move towards a just, sustainable, and circular economy model, which is exactly what we have been able to achieve through our solar powered mobile libraries, schools, solar street lights, powering computer literacy, and climate resilience education, and providing green jobs in order to strengthen their economy. The core principles of circular economies that include designing out of waste and pollution, regenerating natural systems, and reusing materials and goods decreases our dependency on unsustainable supply chains and promotes water and nutrient security. Implementation of circular economies goes hand in hand in mitigating climate change, the biggest threat to humanity, and creating decent long-term job opportunities. It is high time we phase out the implementation of fossil fuels and shift to clean, renewable energy, invest in smart and affordable infrastructural projects, redirect funds to low carbon economies, minimize waste production, and switch to regenerative agriculture. The blueprint for this deep seated transformative change is already available in the United Nations Agenda 2030. It is only the matter of implementation to usher in systemic economic change. This has the potential to trigger far-reaching change and put the world back on track to achieve the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals while leaving no one behind. Over the past 2 years, we have seen many hardships. Millions of people have lost their loved ones, and millions have lost their jobs, making us realize that we need an economic model that does not buckle under the stress, but one that is resilient and survives unplanned stresses. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anshita, for that comprehensive overview of all of the points discussed during our panel. And we have only 50 minutes for this side event today, but it was so amazing to hear all of the perspectives from our panelists. And I can see on the WOVA platform that we have a lot of positive comments from our attendees who are speaking to us about why it's so important that circular economy models are adopted and are agreeing with all of the points made by our panelists. So with that, I would like to thank all of our panelists for sharing your views with us here today. This is a discussion that must be had. And after this, it is imperative that we implement all of the points discussed on the ground so that we can truly ensure that life of dignity for all and make sure that the SDGs are implemented on the ground. And today we have spoken about how important it is to take on a more humanitarian approach, a more empathetic approach, wherein we have a circular understanding of humanity as well. And all of you have highlighted how important it is to, when we speak about circular economy, to not forget about human beings and the environment as well. And how, if we want true long-term security, we have to focus on our human development and not waste that money on arms, which are instead killing people. We've also highlighted the importance of localized solution. And yes, we have to move away from the Western hegemonic way of thinking and understand that different communities have different needs and people are different. So we need to bring all of our voices to the table and make sure that we can reach out to the farthest first so that no one's left behind. So with that, please stay safe, stay connected, take very good care of yourselves and your loved ones. Enjoy the rest of the ECOSOC Partnership Forum. And from our side at Green Hope Foundation, we hope to see you at our next webinar. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.